Chad, I lit a cigar. This is real reporting. This is how it happens. I lit a cigar, and I walked over to a guy who works at the restaurant, and this guy was helping those members of the House find where they needed to go. There's an event space behind the barbecue joint. It's a tent that's adjacent to the parking lot. It's an event tent. It's cool. I wouldn't say it's a big tent, but I would say that they did have this meeting there. You get what I'm getting at. Anyway, they had this meeting there, and I walked over to this guy, who's helping those members find where they need to go. I've got a lit cigar in my mouth, and I said to the guy, "Is it cool to just smoke over here in the shaded area?" I said, "I'm waiting on some people." And, of course, he doesn't know what I'm talking about, but I'm waiting to see which members are showing up for this thing. So I sat down on one of the big rocks there that's underneath a nice shade tree, and I see some people coming in and out. But a bunch of people were already in there. And here's what there's going to be some debate and some question about how many members were really there and how many how many folks are really signing on to this endorsement of David Cook. And I'll get to some more background on him in just a little bit. David Cook, a representative from North Texas who's running for Speaker, he got the endorsement of this group that gathered at the County Line Barbecue. But, Chad, this part, I will say, is just kind of funny. They were meeting in this tent adjacent to the parking lot. There's a privacy fence between the tent and the parking lot. And within the tent, they were, the people leading the meeting were talking on a PA system. I could hear them. I could hear what they were saying. So I just walked over there. I'm still smoking my cigar. And I think, I might be corrected on this, but I know the voices in the Texas House. It sounded like Nate Schatzline, who's a very conservative member from Tarrant County. It sounded like he was talking on the microphone, and he said, this is what he was telling them. It sounded like Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club.
Yeah.
He was saying the first rule of the meeting is that you cannot make any video or audio recording of this meeting.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. Yeah, I know. And I'm standing there listening to it. So I could hear them talk about how they're going to save Texas and all that. And they were applauding. The group was applauding the things being said on the microphone. And what I was able to do in listening to how loud the applause was, and, I'm a radio pro like you. I've been at this a long time. I have a keen sense of audio. I've been to a lot of events, and I know what a large crowd sounds like and what a small crowd sounds like. So I'm putting two things together. How many cars are in the parking lot at 10 a.m. before the restaurant opens, and what that crowd sounded like in there. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. And so I'm guessing, Chad, that maybe 25 to 30 people were in there, something like that, not the more like 50 that they're talking about. Now, if it was really 50 who had signed on and endorsed this guy, David Cook, that would be one thing that would be more significant than if it's just 25 or 30. It was also my understanding, and this is just based on my sourcing within the Republican caucus, it was my understanding that they were not only, and this is completely outside of the caucus, the official GOP caucus, by the way, and everything I'm describing is coloring wildly outside the lines of what's allowed by the GOP caucus rules. You know that there have been some very outspoken Republicans who have said what they want to do, including Tom Oliverson, who was running for Speaker from Houston. They had said they wanted to do what? They wanted to follow the caucus rules for endorsing, somebody to be the Speaker candidate that is preferred by Republicans. This meeting, as far as I can tell, is not allowed at all. And I posted the bylaws of the caucus. I posted them last week at quorumreport.com, and people are free to correct me if I'm not right. But this meeting seemed like it had nothing to do with what the official caucus rules are. It was my understanding that they were going to allow people to vote, even if they were not there. Not just having proxy people there for them to vote, but that there might be a Zoom setup or something where people could be anywhere. They could be in their home districts. They could be on a European vacation. They could be voting in this meeting. At least that's part of my understanding about how this was supposed to go down. So they get through this meeting. They come out around, and they went in there around 10 a.m., and they came out of the barbecue place with a statement around 3 o'clock, 3:30, something like that. And it's sounded like they were getting behind this guy, David Cook, who put out a statement that said he was, really thrilled to have the endorsement of the County Line Barbecue Group. And I'm sorry. and that night, I'll just tell you this. I got some calls from some very right-wing activists in the state who asked this question. They said, Scott, is David Cook really our guy? He is someone who voted for impeachment of Ken Paxton. He's somebody who supports casino gambling and a host of other things that the grassroots of the Republican Party just don't seem to be all about. I mean, one Republican activist said, wasn't there just a lot of money spent over the last year to attack all these guys for voting to impeach, and now this reformer group wants to come out and endorse somebody who voted for impeachment?
Yeah.
Now, I will say, right. So I will say that for David Cook, for him, I have no personal issue with the man. He's always been gracious to me. He was the mayor of Mansfield years ago. When he ran for Texas House, I would just say he replaced, do you remember Bill Zedler,
Yep.
who was a very, very conservative member of the House from Tarrant County? He succeeded Representative Zedler. And when Cook ran for office, when he ran for Texas House, he was not, I think this is fair. Again, if someone wants to correct me, they can. He was not presenting himself to voters as the firebrand conservative. But we do know that there is always ambition at play with these things. It's politics, Chad. Imagine that. It very well may be that Representative Cook wants to run for the Texas Senate coming up in the next primary coming up in 2026 and might want to present himself at that time as a true conservative alternative. And we've seen this movie before. You may remember that Attorney General Paxton, when he was a Texas House member years ago, he ran against then Speaker Joe Straus and presented himself as the conservative alternative. He used that as a springboard to make his way to the Texas Senate and then to the Attorney General's office. Same thing was true for Senator Brian Hughes from East Texas. When he was a House member, he ran against Straus. He presented himself as the conservative alternative, and he used that to run for the Texas Senate. It's my understanding he'd like to run for Attorney General or something else higher up someday. And so it's a tried and true tactic to run for higher office after challenging a sitting speaker. And I think here's one way to think about it and one way to say it. It's the unsuccessful bid for speaker that is a stepping stone to higher office. The successful bid for speaker, and this happened with Straus, this happened with Bonin, this has happened probably with Phelan. When you win the speaker's office, that's a dead end. You don't go anywhere after that. None of those folks are able to run for anything else because they spend all their time in office being attacked by the right wing.
Yeah. Well, the reformer group, which I guess they kind of call themselves the reformer group.
Reformer caucus or something.
This seems to be made up, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to be made up of some of the very far right members, correct?
Mm-hmm. It is. And
that's what's interesting to me is that
this is who they then came out with.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Because Cook is, at least according to some of the tweets or X's,
mm-hmm.
whatever we're calling it, that were put out by some of the activists and conservative activists who were a little bit concerned here. They said, wait a minute, some of the people that we exiled and we called rhinos have a better conservative score than Cook when it comes to Texans for fiscal responsibility and some of these other scorecards. That some of the Republicans that had been exiled and called rhinos had a better score than he did.
Right. Here's something else that I can report on your show now because I've been trying to kind of figure out what was going on with this. It was my understanding that on Thursday evening, and maybe all day on Thursday, but for sure on Thursday evening, several Texas House members reported that Lieutenant Governor Patrick was privately reaching out to some of the Texas House members who were going to be in attendance at this meeting, and Patrick was urging them to vote for Representative John Smithee from Amarillo to be the endorsed candidate for Speaker. And I wouldn't be shocked by that, Chad, because you might remember during the impeachment proceedings, Patrick was very complimentary of the way that Smithee had talked about the impeachment process and said that it was handled all wrong. And, of course, Smithee is one of those who voted against the impeachment. And so he was in agreement with Lieutenant Governor Patrick and the Senate. That I don't know exactly what shook out in that meeting. It was not, I could hear some of what they were saying, as I said, but the way that it ended up with Smithee reportedly eventually just dropping out because there were others who hoped that Cook would end up getting the endorsement instead. All of that just sort of happened in a way that is suspect, not to me necessarily. I mean, it is kind of to me, but really more importantly to Republican House members. And some of those who were there said that this is, from some private conversations that were had over the last few days, some of those in attendance said that if this is the way these meetings are going to go, then I'm not sure I'm going to show up for another one. And here's another thing. They didn't collect signatures of those who supposedly say that they support David Cook for Speaker.
Right.
And that I think is key in all this. When you see Cook claim that he has more than half of the Republican caucus with him, he may think that, and he may think that in good faith. I'm not questioning his, whether he's telling the truth. But this has happened before in speakers races, Chad. There are 150 members of the House. But when certain people are running for Speaker and they start to get commitments from different people, promises from different people, if you started to talk to all the members who said they had promises from different people, you might find out that there's really 250 members of the House, because that's how many promises had been made to different candidates.